It's so great to see you all here. I'm really, really, really glad to have such a crowd. But Daniel, does this make you nervous or does it relax you?
We shall see, we shall see. No, it's lovely.
Yeah, so this is here the launch of this beautiful, beautiful book of poems, Little Estuaries, written by Daniel. And Daniel used to work here in Brick Lane Bookshop, so that's why we thought we have a full circle now coming back here. So it's been really great that you could have us here. Yeah, my name is Elte. I am the publisher of this beauty. And yeah, before I introduce Daniel, maybe a lot of people know him, not everybody will, I think. I'll first introduce myself and my publishing company. So I run an indie press in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And we're based on a sailing barge. We're crossing the channel, really, which has become a bit more problematic, recently because of some changes in the political situation. But still, we persisted, and here we are. This is not the first publication of HetMoet-Menard. I will tell you a little bit about the weird name our publishing house has. This is the second one. Maybe some of you know, but we've been working with the person that made this lovely artwork on the cover. She's unfortunately not here, but I should mention her straight away. Her name is Louisa Albani, and she makes these beautiful work of art. And she's done this before for a cover of our very first UK publication, which was an anthology on being ill. And of course, we didn't have a launch back then because this was published in the COVID years. So this is the very first time I'm actually launching a book with real people in a real bookshop. And yeah, that's really, really lovely. So my publishing, my indie press is called HetMoet, and I'm not going to explain to you what it means because the pun doesn't work and the language game doesn't work, but the logo is a small mammoth and trying to break out of some frame because we're a kind of unconventional publishing house in many, many ways, I think. Creativity is something we really, really always put at the front. The makers of a book, which is not me, I'm the facilitator, but the authors and the illustrators and the translators that we work with are all part of an ever-growing community here in London and UK and back in Amsterdam. So last year we started this British imprint, and that was a tricky one because, as I said, business between UK and Europe has become a bit more difficult. But my very good friend Anthony Rudolph, who is also here, used to run the historically, this is a lot of people know of Menard Press. I think it was an indie press back in the 70s. And the 80s and the 90s, and I think until about 2007, I'm looking at you as I speak, and then Anthony thought it was the time to focus more on his own writing rather than publishing, and also because publishing has changed quite drastically over the years. Digitalization for one thing, but it's also become a serious corporate business, but on the other hand, you still have indie presses trying to break through that framework of corporate publishing, and here we are. So I said to Anthony, what are you going to do with Menard Press? Should we not merge or something, or try to keep Menard Press alive, because it's got a history, it's got a beautiful story, it's got still beautiful books available, and let's work on this together. And so we did. So we also combined the names of the two publishing companies, which is now going to be the most unpronounceable publishing house, called HetMoet-Menard Press. Welcome. You can practice at home. It's been an absolute honor to be working with Daniel. Louisa Albani, I mentioned her before, actually put us into touch. Because of the water theme, running literally through the artwork, but also through his poems. I mean, water or the maritime theme is a big thing because back in Amsterdam we're on the sailing barge. And I think it's no, it's not Gareth Evans, but I know that he does connect a lot of people. But it was Louisa, really herself, that connected the two of us. And I read his poems, and they're ever so tiny, concentrated. They are humble, yet they are so powerful. And I loved it from the start. And, you know, I'm one of these crazy publishers that says, let's do it. And then I'm going to think, oh my God, how am I going to pay for it? And when is it going to happen? And how are we going to go about it? Oh, paper crisis, oh, this or the other. No, I said yes. And if I say yes, I mean yes. So we took it from there. And we've been working on this together with the team back home and with the team here in Newcastle, Impress. And it's been a lovely journey, and finally we're here. And this is for the first time I actually see the book, because the book was delivered quicker than I was here, because I always travel by ferry, so I never fly. So my journey took 7 hours, and this one arrived last week. So that's really good.
Sorry.
Yeah, Daniel Kramb. I mean, you've published before, yeah? I'm thinking London Magazine, Prototype. You're a member of, I guess, Poetry Kitchen, and yes, you've published books, I think, as well. Before, I've read some of your fiction.
Fiction, yeah.
Yeah, but this is your very first book of poems, right? Yeah. Well, congratulations on that one. We're gonna listen to Daniel read and talk about how he came about writing these poems, and how it was a process of, yeah, I think it reads like a long meditation, some people say, and I've also heard you reciting them, and it works just like that, I think. So it's very much, very, I don't know, focused experience, and that's something we're lacking quite often in this busy city and this busy life. So yeah, I've experienced a real sense of calmness, you know, mostly. And maybe that was the case when you were writing them as well. I don't know, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the writing process. Of course, the book is for sale. That's my job to tell you and to remind you. And before I give you all the room and all the pleasure to be sharing your book and your poems with the audience, I'd like to give you a small present. And the present, you don't have to open it now, but this is for you.
Thank you.
And these are for you. And maybe I'd like to share this with the audience, because you'll find one of these postcards in the book you might like to buy. And there's 3 different artworks with some poems of you, and Louisa has made them, and they're just stunning. Again, it's just such tiny work, such big, art really that came about. So 3 of them. And you'll find them in the book. Not all 3, I just randomly put one aside. So yeah, Daniel, thanks for this experience, and I hope this is not the last time we work together.
I hope so too, and thank you very, very much, Elte. It's been an amazing journey to do this with you, and thank you all for being here tonight. It really means a lot. When I started writing these poems about 3 years ago, I definitely did not think about a book. I'll tell you a little bit about the process in a minute. I read a little bit first, so you get a sense, but yeah, a book was very far off, and there's a few steps, but just working with you over the last few months has been amazing. I'm so happy that we managed to put this together, and it is really very, very beautiful. It's amazing to be back in the Brick Lane bookshop. As you heard, I used to work here 7 or 8 years ago. It's a very special time. I was writing a novel at the time, and I was isolating myself a lot, sort of tough times, but these guys really were my family, and they're very close in my heart, so it's nice to be back for that. Anyway, enough talk. I think I'll just read some poems, and then we'll have a little chat after that.
Yeah, sure.
light swims slowly to a somewhere. Your mind rethinks its territory. A shimmer, vague but likely. This distance is no measure of belonging. Between the land and the idea of a land, each search divisionless, a clearing. How mud exposed remembers slow subside of scars. Not sure still, nor yet see footsteps of intent. In ever-shifting sands, what pattern, no image bolder than these blanks. If imagined, a causeway stretches, washed clean corner of the mind. In nightfall's border break but briefly, what only skin can understand. Between the afar and you cannot bring near. Raw interiors, hand disheveled. From alcoves assumed low as night, swept skeletons of a singing. To energies aroused, no line, each breath, infinity inflicted. Mid-flat, where a feeling ought to be, the remembrance of stars. Maybe I'll leave it there for now. We'll come back to it.
I think I'm going to stand up because
better,
you're all the way down there. So just, Daniel, what is it with the estuary?
I know, right? It's mad. It's interesting. Very often when you kind of ask where does poetry come from, or where does a book of poetry come from, the answer is kind of I don't know. And with this one, funnily enough, it's kind of, there is a kind of trajectory that I can sort of pinpoint, and it all started with us moving out into the estuary. So, you know, we used to live in London for many, many years, decades almost, and then moved out to West Cliff-on-Sea in the South End, and there was this landscape which we've every now and again sort of moved into, but now suddenly we were living in it, and we were sort of immersed in this very strange kind of, you know, it's, I don't know if you've been there, but it's you know, it's the Thames estuary, there's extreme tides, the sea goes all the way out as if it wasn't even there, and then it comes all the way back in again, and it's kind of the sea, but it's also not really the sea, and yeah, I was very, very sort of fascinated by that landscape. And at the same time, just after we moved, we had the first lockdown, so while I was out there in this landscape, I couldn't really explore the landscape as much as I wanted to. A day walk only gets you so far. So yeah, it was also then at the point when I really started getting into poetry again, and yeah, so I just started getting up every morning at 6:30 and try to sort of write myself into that landscape and you know, sort of imagine it and just spend time with it, and you know, I just kept doing that and at the beginning it was the complete opposite of what you find in this book now. The first draft of this book was like an epic sort of 60 pages, really dense kind of, you know.
I've not seen that.
No, no one will, well, one person in the room has seen it, but no one else will have it probably. But you know, that was at the time I thought, oh my God, there's this sort of epic landscape out here. The estuary is this kind of crazy sphere. I need to do something that is epic in that sense. And over time, as I started working on it, I sort of realized that's completely the wrong approach, and there's no way that you can capture that kind of specialness and that mystery and in that sense. And so slowly over time, this crazy thing whittled itself down into smaller things, and then smaller things, and then smaller things still. And eventually this form started to kind of come. You see it in the book, they are actually always 6 lines, and they look a little bit like an estuary on the page. So the first line is always the longest, and then it comes out. And God knows when that happened, but it did happen at some point. And then that gave it a kind of, a form that I could work with. And then,
So you're saying you try to write yourself into the landscape, and I believe this is happening quite literally soon, yeah? I mean, can you talk a bit about the artwork that is going to...
Oh yeah, there's going to be a new development along the south coast in Essex. They're connecting lots of different stretches of Greenland into one big park, and there's going to be a seating structure at some point somewhere there, and that will have some of the little estuaries engraved in wood, which is a very beautiful way of kind of putting the poems into the landscape.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was interesting. The Thames estuary is definitely sort of the main inspiration for it, but then other kind of estuaries came into it, and further up in Essex and in Wales and Ireland a lot. Sort of where we went, and much of it is sort of kind of imagined estuaries as well. And it's not, you see, it's not really about landscape. I'm not trying to sort of picture this landscape or portray it. It's much more sort of about the person being in it and the experience and the sort of interaction with it, and it kind of goes back to the body and the body out there in this sphere. And the mystery, I mean, it's a lot about what cannot be said and what cannot be understood, and I hope that they're sort of open poems in that sense, and that as the reader you sort of start bringing around to it.
I think you've done something quite new, although I must say that the estuary has been rediscovered as of late. You mentioned that you started walking there once you moved over, and of course some books have been published with, Estuary by Rachel Lichtenstein, who's been so kind to offer us a quote on the back. And then there was, I think, I can't remember now, I think it's also called Estuaries. No, the Way to the Sea. Yeah, and very much about somebody growing up on the Thames estuary. And there's Lucia Dove, who grew up in Southend-on-Sea. And Lucia is again somebody who also lives just like me pretty much between 2 countries, and we cross the estuary all the time. So I have a personal relationship with the estuary. I grew up in the south of Holland, which is a big estuary as well, and then there's the estuary here. But did you start your relationship with the estuary because of your writing? And did you literally every day get up at 6:30 and try to write a poem about the estuary? Because that is quite impressive, I must say. That's some kind of
Yeah, well, the answer to the last question is yes, I did that for a very long time, too long than anyone should probably. And I should say I was in this tiny room, and at the time we just moved into this house. I didn't even have a desk I could sit in, so I was sitting on the floor with my back to the radiator. But no, I did not. I mean, the estuary was just there, and the writing then sort of came from that.
Do you still love the estuary as much as when you
as much, and nothing has changed. It's still there. It's still as beautiful and still as mysterious, and I still walk out, and it says in the back, there's no answers in this. There's no figuring it out. I mean, that's why I love poetry. I mean, it's sort of I think of them as approaches. It's a kind of tentative sort of trying to get close to something that cannot really be expressed ever, and that's sort of for me where the interest was, and that hasn't changed. So I still sort of walk out into the estuary every day, and it's still.
So you're gonna stay.
You're still all there.
You're not gonna come back to London,
I
even though you said I'm not never gonna leave London.
No,
There you are.
now I'm going to say I never leave the estuary.
Oh,
so,
okay.
you know,
Well, I wonder
we'll
what's
see.
next.
We'll see what's next.
That's really great. So how did Louisa, the artist that is actually responsible for a lot of pamphlets, she runs a private press, and she makes these beautiful pamphlets on William Blake and Virginia Woolf and now the Bronte sisters. How did she come about drawing something inspired by your poetry?
Yeah, I mean, so this was really one of the most important moments in this whole project, when I was just doing this thing on my own, and then the London magazine said, oh, we really like some of these poems and we'd like to publish some. And at the time they were doing a special on Keats, I think, and Louisa was doing the cover.
Right.
And Lucy Bentley at the London magazine said, oh, I think it would be nice if we put your poems together with some of those drawings, and that's how that started.
Excellent.
And I have to say, it's one of the most beautiful collaborations I've been part of. And Louisa was obviously responding to the poems, but in many ways that also set a lot off for me, and I think the whole project kind of took another leap at that point, because her input then also kind of got me to kind of go elsewhere and explore new things. And yeah, it's been beautiful to kind of work with her ever since, and you see the postcards, and there was just a real sort of understanding from the first moment that I could just see that she got immediately what
Yeah,
I was trying to do
absolutely.
there, and then she came up with her own
So
response to that.
she made this cover as well of the anthology on being ill, which we made previous. So I knew Louisa, you knew Louisa, and there, and this is what I love really, about making books. Really, it's crazy that we're still doing it, because it's such hard work to run an indie press and an indie bookshop, but collaboration is absolutely at the core of it. And
Absolutely,
the
and then,
happiness
Louisa
that-
Dan connected me to you, so this is where Dan, the next level began, and again, that was really beautiful, because at that point I really still wasn't sure if there was a book in this at all, because these are tiny poems, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
poems first of all, and then they're tiny, and they're sort of,
well, they're like little pebbles, shining.
and
whilst you're
and
walking.
again, like with Louisa, when we first met and you read some, I could sort of sense, oh yeah, maybe it's sort of, And
Yes.
then I famously smuggled the manuscript from one side of the estuary to the other side, on the train under the water, and
Yeah.
went in Whittled,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's when we kind of started to really think about putting a book together.
And here it is. Here it is.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again. I'm going to read you a few more poems, if that's all right. I have a few thanks to say as well. I've written them down because I usually forget. Whittled Bookshop, thank you so much again for having us. Really, really great. Louisa, you heard much about her. Sadly, she can't be here with us tonight, but I mean, real huge thanks for this collaboration and her input. Rishi Dasida, who is here tonight, thank you so much for your initial feedback. That was an absolutely crucial step in getting these poems to where they are now. It's like, I think it was about Christmas time 2 years ago, I remember it so well. And I think it was shortly after that the form, as you now have it in the book, sort of started emerging. So thank you so much. Gareth Evans, the Gareth Evans, as he's now known, there at the back. I mean, you've been a supporter and a courage teacher for me for so long. I can't express my gratitude enough. It's like having a sort of hand on your shoulder that tells you to keep going. So thank you so much, and for your words on this book. Elte, I mean, I've said a lot already, but I mean, it was just amazing to go through this journey with you, and I'm so glad we managed to put together what we
Me too.
now have. And
Thank you.
no, it's not going to be the last time we work together. Special shout out to Frankie, my brother-in-law, who came all the way from Ireland for this, the crazy man. Thank you. It's lovely to have him here. Another very special shout out to Nico, my dog, because dogs do not get nearly enough recognition. We have a dog in the house, actually, he's over there.
Yeah, which is mine.
Which is Elsa's. But Nico has been with me on those 6:30 shifts pretty much all the way through, and has given me comfort, and it's sort of, never complains when I think it's a good idea to read poetry to him for an entire night. And final, very, very special thanks to my wife Jean, who's been so supportive and great and amazing, and especially in this sort of arranging everything. And thank you, you're amazing, and I love you. And that's it. More poetry, and then we can all just hang out and have a drink and
buy a book.
Exactly.
Waters seen asunder, try build your house into the tidal flow. What yield from edgeland scrap, rich fractal of a rising, on lens lapping inward lead? What's loving in your looking? Where the images find their projector current, you cannot stand the sea from here. No birds adrift on tidal. These streams, you make your own. The soiled and heavy stand, right and ahead with your letting go. Clouds cracked, a low light shimmer, strength like a gust in your bones. Waterborne as surface cone, held half submerged, amen. Where seeing curves its cavity, trace of a boldening response. Exposed as naked in retreat, a slow approaching in attempts. Yielding definition to each side's shore, but hills are still conceivable here. Swept together on a bright white light. Reluctantly, life's ebbing. Towards the sky you sculpt, tight taken. It cannot swim. In the persistence of a ray, a search for seen is diminished. Wash towards bare feet as words. There is no keeping here, no translation. To the vine standing borderless, no land. The body responds off mind. Enclosed by safety's lock, but from within, the borders redraw. Wrapped as if by bodies, a tide that leaves with nothing.